Everyone, Del21 here. Um, this is as bright as it's going to get today, at least till like 9 to 10 o'clock today. So the way this camera works is that it darkens the screen once you start pressing play, and no matter if I have it on auto or off, it still does it. Um, but anyway, so I got asked to elaborate on what I meant by a stored code that you can read, or in a stored code that still shows up. Essentially, when I did my after I put that occupant restraint module on my truck and it freaked out the entire CAN network, I had codes from the body control module all the way up to the RFH module. Now, once I took that module out, the CAN system went back to normal. But what ended up happening was everything went from either active to pending or went to active to stored. Now, if it was a stored code, essentially just because you clear it doesn't actually clear that stored code. And what that means is you can like a loss of communication code, you could probably clear in most cases if it was that, like what I did with the CAN network, and that was all that was wrong with it, and it's not actually something wrong with it. You can clear. I missed my turn. You can clear that code, and it will come back. I mean, it won't come back, and you won't see a stored code at all. But essentially, if you have codes that are stored and freeze data specifically for diagnostic purposes or emissions, you can clear that code and it'll still show that it's in there, but it won't actually show that it's a DTC. It'll just still be in there as a I guess reference. I don't know what you call it. It's there, but it's not there, is basically what I'm saying. Now, a couple people didn't understand why my Alltel, after I said that I basically said that the only thing wrong with my truck is the occupant restraint module, which has the traction control information in it and has my stuff for the ABS, which is the traction control, and the airbag, obviously, which is why I had those lights on it. But when I cleared it, it still had like tons of check engine light codes in it. Well, here's the thing. This is what I was getting at. Most scan tools, when you clear, like the Alltel, let's just speak on the Alltel since that's the one I primarily use over my YTAC or the Launch. With my Alltel, if you go to the report all screen, where it basically does a complete scan of all the modules, and if you're on that module, if you're in that screen and you click erase codes, that's a soft erase. That's not a hard erase. And to explain that, it's no different than if you basically go into your phone and you restart your phone by just turning it off, telling it to restart and come back. That's a soft restart. If you go into your phone and do a forced restart, that's a hard restart. And that's what that screen does. It does a soft restart instead of a hard restart. And that's why every time I went to codes, after I did a clear restart, clear codes, it was still in there. Those codes are still in there because it will only clear active codes that went to pending. It will or codes that went from pending to stored that isn't freeze frame data, or that isn't a frozen code, which is the little snowflake next to it. It's a stored code that the soft clear can't clear. Is essentially what I get from it. So if I go into each individual module and clear the code, clear that freeze code, or clear that stored code that's in it, it will clear those individually. And then I can go back and I can do a system scan, and every module that had those in it is now gone and it's passed because now the stored code's not in it. However, what I meant by the code would be stored, but it's not an active code, that's when you have a check engine light code, a check engine light on your dash, but if you plug your scan tool in it, now keep in mind, if you don't use something higher up, such as a dealer tool or an Altel or a high level launch, or, well, it doesn't have to be a high level launch. As long as you get a launch that can read high speed CAN networks, which is the cheapest you can get, I think only reads the engine and transmission and maybe ABS. I don't know. And or maybe airbag, depending on which model you get. If you get a standard scan tool and you have a check engine light code, it will only show you the code that's active. Essentially, the reason for that is those lower level scan tools aren't designed to read body codes. And that's essentially what, because of what I'm dealing with on my truck, they're mostly body codes, not actually trouble codes or engine or powertrain code. They're not powertrain codes. So essentially, a regular scan tool will only see, okay, there's a check engine light, but I don't see any codes. Those are, if you take that into account, that is what you would see under a code that you can, a stored code that you can clear, and it will always show you a check engine light, or it will always be stored that you can see with a check that your scan tool will see as an error. If you have a higher level scan tool, it'll show you have one DTC in there. But if you have a lower level one, typically you'll have a check engine light, but it won't show you a DTC because it's a stored code, not an active code. Those codes are typically like if you need an evap monitor ran, or you need a catalyst converter monitor ran. Basically codes that require a drive cycle or a key on, key off cycle. Those, your lower level scan tools typically won't pick up. But if you have something like an Altel, Snap-on, is it OTC, your launch, if you have any, your YTEX, your Tech 2s, if you have those, they will pick those up, even though it's not a code that's active for your typical scan tool to pick up. In my situation that I have, most of my codes will be stored codes because I'm taking this off, I'm putting that on, I'm taking this off to check something else, taking that off to check everything. So typically, I'm actually going to have a lot of stored codes where a scan tool from AutoZone, you can't hook up to it and it'll basically see what I'm doing. Because what I'm doing is dealing with body modules that will throw body codes and not actual powertrain codes. So typically, a regular scan tool won't see what I'm talking about when you have a stored code that you can still see a DT, or you can see your money light even though you don't have a code in there anymore. And that's a stored code that needs to run a drive cycle or needs to go through some kind of parameter for the check engine light to say, okay, I no longer need to do that. A lot of times, really, the lower level scan tools will only read, most of them will read the ECM. Some of them will read transmission, some of them will read ABS, some of them will read your airbag modules, but I think, if I'm not mistaken, all of them will read your ECM. Your primary codes that the ECM will display for those scan tools are your powertrain codes. Rarely will you find a scan tool where it will show you body codes, which are U codes. Barely. You will get chassis codes. It will show you chassis codes, but it won't show you body codes, or basically network codes. It won't show you those. You have to actually go higher up in the tier with scan tools to actually be able to do that, which is what I have to do that. I'll have to show. I might do that on a video if it doesn't pour down rain today, or if it doesn't rain at all, which looks like it's going to pour down rain. If it doesn't and it gets blue sky and clear, I'll whip out both scan tools. And what I'll do is I'll hook one scan tool up to my 14 Ram. I'll hook the Alltel up to my 2014 Ram, and I'll hook the launch is it CRP 123 or CPR 123. I'll hook that up to it, and I'll show you the difference. The CPR 123 or CRP 123 launch that I have, that one will only read engine, transmission, and I want to say ABS. If it's in the vehicle for that program. Not every program on the launch will let you actually read the ABS, but it'll let you read the engine, maybe the transmission. And I'll show you what the Alltel does when it plugs in, which I'm pretty sure anyone that looks knows what an Alltel will do. But it'll basically show you what an Alltel will read and what an Alltel won't. Of course, I'll have to figure out a way to cause a check engine light that will, oh my God, focus on me. I'll have to figure out a way to cause a body code to come up for you to be able to see it on the, I'll probably do both of them on the new RAM, and show you what I mean by you can't read codes on the cheaper scan tools that are in there that's showing a check engine light. We'll have to see, because I do know, I think I can plug the launch into the 14 RAM, but I don't know if it'll read the codes that I don't know. I'll have to see. If it does or if it doesn't, I'll see if I can get video of that and I'll show it to you. And you can basically compare what's the difference between a $1,500 or really, I think my Alltel was like $1,800. Yeah, basically you can tell the difference between a $1,800 to $2,500 model scan tool from a $150 to $350 scan tool. I'll put those side by side, and you'll be able to see. And also, I'll show what the dealer tool would look like, and you basically can compare that. So if it don't rain, I'll whip all those out, and we'll do what we do. All right, peace.